Loneliness in Star Wars isn't just silence, it's survival. And no one carried that burden more quietly than Obi-Wan Kenobi. The man who once led armies ended his life hiding in a cave, watching over a child who didn't even know he existed. To most of the galaxy, he was gone. But in truth, he was the reason it still had a future. When the Jedi fell, Kenobi didn't just lose his brothers in arms, he lost his faith, his purpose, his very reason to exist. Yet instead of collapsing, he endured. He became the galaxy's invisible guardian, the last spark of an extinct order. The Force didn't give him glory, it gave him solitude. And somehow he turned that into strength. Imagine carrying the guilt of your best friend's death, the shame of a war that betrayed everything you believed in, and then choosing to keep living. Not for yourself, but for a child you'll never speak to. That's not just devotion. That's tragedy disguised as faith. Kenobi's story isn't about adventure or triumph. It's about endurance. About what happens when hope can't shout anymore, so it whispers. In a galaxy consumed by darkness, Obi-Wan's silence was the only sound of resistance left. It's easy to romanticize the Jedi as noble warriors, but Obi-Wan's greatness didn't come from battle. It came from staying when everyone else was gone. His life became proof that sometimes the greatest act of courage is to keep believing when you have every reason not to. In this video, we'll explore how Kenobi's loneliness became the price of hope, how his years of exile kept the dream of the Jedi alive, and why one man's quiet suffering became the heartbeat of an entire galaxy's redemption. When the Republic fell, Obi-Wan Kenobi didn't just lose a government, he lost a galaxy of meaning. Every belief, every friendship, every purpose he'd ever known was wiped out overnight. And yet, he lived. That's the cruel irony of survival. It's never triumph, it's punishment. While Anakin became a monster and Yoda vanished into exile, Obi-Wan was left to pick up the emotional wreckage of a war that had already erased everything he fought for. The Jedi were gone. The temple burned. The clones who once saluted him were now soldiers of the Empire. Imagine walking through the ashes of your own faith, knowing you couldn't do a thing to stop it. That's not heroism. It's torment wrapped in patience. And Kenobi bore it alone. When he left Mustafar, it wasn't victory. It was defeat wearing the mask of duty. He didn't just walk away from his brother, he walked away from everything human inside him. That lightsaber duel wasn't closure, it was trauma frozen in fire. Obi-Wan didn't kill Anakin to save the galaxy. He did it because he couldn't save him any other way. Tatooine became his purgatory. A desert graveyard where time stood still, and the wind whispered names he'd never say again. He wasn't just protecting Luke, he was punishing himself. Watching the boy from afar became both redemption and torture. Every sunset reminded him of the order that failed, and the promise he couldn't fulfill. You can feel it in every word of A New Hope. That haunted calm, that sad wisdom. It's not serenity, it's exhaustion. He smiles like someone who's already said goodbye 1,000 times. When Luke asks about his father, you can see it, the tiny flicker of guilt in his eyes. It's the weight of every lie he's told just to keep hope alive. What makes Obi-Wan fascinating is that he wasn't delusional about the Jedi. He knew their flaws. He saw how arrogance and bureaucracy blinded them to the dark side's return. But even after the collapse, he never stopped believing that the idea of the Jedi still mattered. It wasn't the code he was protecting, it was the possibility that goodness could survive power. His loneliness wasn't cowardice, it was strategy, a silent rebellion against despair. Every day he stayed alive was one more day the light survived. That's the part people miss. His exile wasn't retreat, it was resistance. And yet beneath that stoic calm was the ache of purpose lost. He had no counsel, no comrades, no war to fight. Just sand, guilt, and the slow corrosion of time. The Force didn't comfort him, it mocked him, reminding him of everything he'd failed to save. Still he stayed, because even if the galaxy had forgotten the Jedi, Obi-Wan refused to forget the galaxy. That's what made his suffering meaningful. It wasn't self-pity, it was sacrifice. Obi-Wan's exile wasn't peaceful, it was psychological warfare. And the enemy was himself. The man who once led armies now couldn't even lift his lightsaber without remembering the screams of his fallen brothers. The hero of the Clone Wars became a ghost living under an alias. Ben, he called himself, as if a new name could bury an old soul. In Kenobi, we see a man broken by his own memories. He hesitates to use the Force, avoids conflict, even flinches at reminders of the past. This isn't a wise old hermit. It's a soldier with survivor's guilt. He saved Luke, but couldn't save Anakin. He saved the galaxy, but couldn't save himself. That's the paradox of heroes. They win battles, but lose identities. His loneliness became a crucible. Without comrades, without purpose, Obi-Wan was forced to confront the silence left behind by decades of noise. No more Jedi debates, no clone chatter, no hum of lightsabers. Just the dry wind and his own regrets echoing off canyon walls. And yet in that emptiness, he found clarity. Pain stripped away his illusions until only faith remained. He started as a man who followed rules. But isolation turned him into someone who understood them. He began to see that the Jedi's obsession with detachment wasn't strength, it was denial. The old Kenobi would have preached serenity, but the broken Kenobi learned compassion. His loneliness forced him to feel what the Jedi had spent centuries avoiding. It's ironic that in solitude, he became more human. The same man who once told Anakin to let go of emotion was now drowning in it. And that's what made him stronger. His exile taught him empathy, the kind that comes from shared pain, not philosophy. When he saw Luke grow up, it wasn't just pride, it was mourning. Luke represented everything Obi-Wan lost and everything he refused to abandon. Every smile the boy gave reminded him that hope was still possible, even in the wasteland of failure. That's what kept him alive, faith that maybe the next generation would get it right. The brilliance of Kenobi's loneliness is that it wasn't passive. It was an act of will. Every day he stayed hidden. Every time he resisted drawing his saber, he was choosing restraint over revenge. The Jedi might have fallen, but their ideals didn't have to. Obi-Wan lived those ideals alone so others could someday live them together. And yet, you can feel the exhaustion in every scene. His eyes don't shine with hope. They flicker with obligation. He's not waiting for a miracle. He's enduring one. That's the difference between faith and delusion. In the end, Obi-Wan's war didn't end with the Empire's fall. It ended when he finally forgave himself. And that took a lifetime of silence to achieve. Obi-Wan's story isn't about survival, it's about meaning. About how one man's isolation kept the entire Star Wars galaxy from collapsing into despair. His life became the bridge between eras. The last Jedi of the old world and the first guardian of the new. And the price of that legacy was loneliness. By the time we meet him in A New Hope, his transformation is complete. The bitterness is gone, replaced by a kind of calm that only comes from total acceptance. He knows his time has passed, but he also knows that his purpose hasn't. That's why his final duel with Vader feels more like poetry than combat. It's not about winning, it's about transferring hope. When he lifts his saber to let Vader strike him down, it's not suicide. It's trust. He's not dying in defeat, he's handing the future to Luke. The same man who once couldn't save Anakin now saves his son through self-sacrifice. That's redemption without words. That's faith without ego. And what's beautiful is that Obi-Wan never sees how it ends. He dies believing only in possibility, not certainty. That's what makes his story tragic and heroic at once. The Force doesn't reward him with closure. It rewards him with peace. In many ways, Obi-Wan's loneliness is the soul of Star Wars itself. It's the quiet persistence of light in a universe that never stops falling apart. He's proof that heroism isn't always loud. It's sometimes just staying alive long enough for hope to return. You can feel that theme ripple through Luke, Rey, even Grogu. Every Jedi after him inherits that same burden, the loneliness of those who believe when no one else will. Obi-Wan turned solitude into an art form, a discipline of endurance that outlasted empires. His story reminds us that isolation doesn't always mean despair. Sometimes it's the crucible where faith is forged. Obi-Wan didn't find peace despite his loneliness. He found it through it. His exile was the galaxy's incubation period for rebirth. When Luke looks up at those twin suns, it's more than a beautiful shot. It's a reflection of Obi-Wan's own patience. Two lights in the void, waiting to rise again. So yes, Kenobi's loneliness was his price to pay. But it bought something priceless. The continuation of hope. The belief that even after the darkest night, the Force will find someone else to carry the light.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.